The book of Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament, with just 1 chapter and 21 verses. Despite its brevity, it carries a profound message of divine justice, focusing on the judgment of Edom for its betrayal of Israel and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. The prophecy is delivered by Obadiah, whose name means servant of the Lord, and it revolves around themes of betrayal, divine retribution, and the restoration of Israel. Historical context: Edom and Israel's ancient rivalry. The book is set against the backdrop of the long-standing hostility between Edom and Israel, two nations descended from twin brothers Esau and Jacob. This sibling rivalry, first detailed in the book of Genesis, lays the foundation for the animosity that continued for generations. Esau, the elder, was cheated out of his birthright and blessing by Jacob, which set the stage for the enduring conflict between their descendants, the Edomites from Esau and the Israelites from Jacob. Throughout history, Edom and Israel's relationship remained fraught with conflict. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness after their exodus from Egypt, the Edomites refused them passage through their land. Numbers 20:14-21. Later, during times of war or crisis, Edom often allied with Israel's enemies or exploited Israel's weaknesses rather than showing solidarity as kin. This recurring pattern of betrayal reached its climax during the Babylonian invasion of Judah in 586 BC when Jerusalem was destroyed. It is in this context that Obadiah delivers his prophecy, condemning Edom's actions during this national tragedy. The betrayal of Edom, gloating over Judah's fall. The main reason for Edom's judgment is its treachery against Israel during Jerusalem's downfall. As Babylonian forces attacked and ransacked the city, the Edomites stood by and did nothing to help their Israelite relatives. Worse, they rejoiced over the destruction of Jerusalem, and even joined in the looting. In verses 11-14, Obadiah lists Edom's specific transgressions. They stood aloof when foreigners entered the gates of Jerusalem and cast lots for the city, showing no compassion for their kin. They gloated over Judah's destruction, taking pleasure in Israel's suffering. They participated in the plundering of Jerusalem, seizing wealth and property from the defeated city. They cut off the escape routes, capturing fleeing Israelites and handing them over to the Babylonians. These actions of betrayal are all the more grievous because of the familial bond between Edom and Israel. Instead of acting as a protective brother nation, Edom capitalized on Judah's suffering, betraying their kin in their darkest hour. This lack of solidarity and, even worse, active complicity in their destruction brought about God's judgment upon Edom. The judgment pronounced against Edom. The heart of Obadiah's prophecy is the judgment that God will bring upon Edom for its arrogance and betrayal. In verses 1-4, God declares that Edom will be brought low despite its pride and sense of invulnerability. The Edomites, living in the mountainous region of Mount Seir, believed their natural fortifications made them safe from any attack. They were geographically well protected, with their cities built into rocky cliffs and high terrain. This led them to feel untouchable, like an eagle that nests among the stars. Obadiah's prophecy cuts through this arrogance, declaring that no matter how high Edom exalts itself, God will bring them down. Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Obadiah 1:4. God uses the metaphor of a small nation being overrun by thieves to emphasize that Edom will face complete devastation. Unlike a typical thief who steals only what is valuable, Edom's destruction will be so thorough that nothing will be left behind. The proud nation that took advantage of Israel's defeat will itself be defeated and desolate. All of Edom's allies will turn against them, and their wise men and warriors will be cut off. Their natural defenses will not save them from divine justice. the broader judgment, the day of the Lord. While the first part of Obadiah's prophecy focuses on Edom, the second half broadens the scope to include all nations that have acted against God's people. Obadiah declares that the day of the Lord is near for all nations. Obadiah 1:15. This phrase, the day of the Lord, refers to a future time of divine judgment when God will punish all the nations for their sins, not just Edom. It signals a shift from a specific judgment against Edom to a universal judgment. Obadiah warns that what Edom has done to others will be done to them. The principle of divine retribution is clear. Just as Edom betrayed and destroyed others, they too will face destruction. God's justice will be meted out fairly to all nations, but the fate of Edom stands as a warning to those who take advantage of the vulnerable and betray their trust. The restoration of Israel, a promise of hope. Even as the prophecy pronounces judgment, it also offers a message of hope and restoration for Israel. In contrast to Edom's destruction, Mount Zion, Jerusalem, will be restored and delivered. Israel will reclaim the land that was taken from them, and the people of Judah will possess the lands of Edom and Philistia. Obadiah envisions a future in which the exiles of Israel will return to their homeland, and the house of Jacob will once again be established. In this restored future, Israel will be like a flame, and Edom like stubble, a fire that consumes its enemies. Israel's victory is assured because it is rooted in God's covenantal promises. God will vindicate his people, and Israel will become the inheritors of the lands that their enemies once possessed. The house of Esau, Edom, however, will be no more, completely consumed by God's judgment. The closing verses of Obadiah are filled with the imagery of triumph, as the remnant of Israel ascends Mount Zion and claims victory. In the end, God's kingdom will reign, and his authority will extend over all nations. The kingdom will be the Lord's. Obadiah 1:21. This final statement encapsulates the overarching theme of the book. Despite temporary injustice and betrayal, God's sovereignty will ultimately prevail. He will restore his people, and his rule will be established forever. Conclusion. The book of Obadiah delivers a powerful message of divine justice in response to betrayal and arrogance. Edom, a nation that should have acted as Israel's protector due to their shared ancestry, instead rejoiced over Israel's destruction and exploited their suffering. For this, God declares that Edom will face total destruction. Obadiah's prophecy also carries a universal message. God's judgment is not limited to one nation. All nations will face the consequences of their actions in the day of the Lord, a time of reckoning for those who act unjustly. Yet even amid judgment there is a promise of hope. For Israel there will be restoration and deliverance, and God's kingdom will reign over all. In its brief but intense 21 verses, Obadiah reminds readers of the seriousness of betrayal, arrogance, and injustice, and the certainty that God's justice will be done. Even when nations rise against God's people, his plan will prevail and his people will ultimately be vindicated.